The town of Cora was alive with the sound of merchants calling out their wares. Bargaining customers haggling for the best prices. And the thick aroma of roasted spices and fresh produce filling the market air. It was a place where fortunes were made, where traders thrived, and where Nia had always dreamed of leaving her mark. From a young age, Nia had known that she was different. She had inherited her mother's skill in cooking. Watching her prepare rich, flavorful dishes that made people's mouths water before the first bite. When her mother passed away, she left behind little more than a collection of old pots, pans, and her cherished recipes. But for Nia, that was enough. With no capital and no family to rely on, she took a risk. She set up a small food stall at the central market square. Cooking from dawn till dusk. Serving meals with a smile. It wasn't easy. The market already had established food vendors, each holding their own loyal customers. Nia's stall was not even on the main food row, a prime spot she could not afford. Instead, she had been forced to rent a space opposite them, squeezed between a fabric seller and a carpenter. At first, people barely noticed her. They walked past her small setup, uninterested in the new girl who had dared to enter the food business in a town where veterans had ruled for years. Days turned into weeks, and she barely made enough to keep her stall running. Some days, she went home with little more than a handful of coins, wondering if she had made a mistake. But fate had other plans. One afternoon, a young trader sat at her stall, tired from a long day of work, and decided to try her food. He took the first bite, then another. Soon, he had cleaned his plate and was asking for more. "This is incredible," he said, wiping his mouth. "Why is no one eating here?" Nia chuckled, shaking her head. "Because they don't know I exist." The trader leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Oh, they will. I'll tell them myself." True to his word, the next day, he returned, this time with 3 others. Word spread like wildfire. Soon, one customer turned into 5, then 10, then more. People came out of curiosity but stayed for the food. The rich aroma of her simmering stews, the perfectly grilled fish, the soft, warm rice infused with delicate spices, it was unlike anything they had tasted before. The other food vendors watched, their smiles growing thin as their customers began wandering to her side of the market. Nia, however, didn't see them as rivals. She was too busy trying to keep up with demand. She had to cook faster, serve quicker, and yet maintain the quality that had brought customers in the first place. She was exhausted, but she was happy. At night, as she scrubbed her pots under the dim lantern light, she would pause and smile, realizing that her stall, her tiny, makeshift restaurant, was becoming something greater than she had ever imagined. She had made her mark on Cora's market square. But success has a way of attracting not just admiration, but envy. And Nia had no idea that her growing popularity was stirring resentment in the hearts of those who had been there before her. The morning sun painted the sky in soft streaks of gold as Nia arrived at the market square. The scent of fresh spices and roasted corn thick in the air. The once empty seats at her stall were now in constant use. And customers had started arriving even before she finished setting up for the day. Business was thriving, but success came with its challenges. As more people flocked to her little restaurant, Nia found herself overwhelmed. She worked from dawn till dusk, cooking, serving, and cleaning, sometimes barely pausing to drink water. The exhaustion was starting to weigh on her, but she couldn't afford to stop. Her customers were loyal, patient even when she struggled to keep up. But she knew that if she didn't find a solution soon, she would burn out. One evening, as she was scrubbing plates under the dim glow of her lantern, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "You should hire someone to help you." She looked up to see Jonas, a young merchant who often came to eat at her stall. He was always friendly, always stayed a little longer than necessary, and always seemed to notice when she was tired. "I've thought about it," Nia admitted, rinsing a plate. "But I'm not sure I can trust anyone with my business. I built this from nothing. If I hire the wrong person, they could ruin everything." Jonas leaned against the counter, watching her. "You won't be able to do this alone forever, Nia. One day, the work will be too much." And by then, it might be too late to find someone reliable. Better to train someone now, before you really need them. She sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. He had a point. The next day, she hung a small handwritten sign in front of her stall. Help wanted, seeking a hardworking, honest assistant. By midday, she had received more applicants than she expected, 10 girls in total, each eager for the job. Some were chatty and full of confidence, others were quiet and unsure. But Nia wasn't just looking for someone to carry plates or stir pots, she needed someone she could trust. That evening, after speaking with each of them, she made her decision. Her choice was Tara, a young orphan with soft brown eyes and a quiet determination. Something about Tara reminded Nia of herself, a girl who had lost everything but was willing to fight for a future. I won't disappoint you, Tara had said earnestly. And at first, she didn't. Tara worked hard, waking up early to help Nia set up and staying late to clean. She learned quickly, mimicking Nia's cooking style, listening carefully when Nia explained how to handle customers. Within weeks, Nia trusted her enough to leave her in charge while she ran errands at the market. Jonas, of course, noticed the change. I told you, he teased one evening as he sat at the stall, watching Tara serve customers. You needed help. Nia smirked. I'll admit, you were right, but don't let it go to your head. Jonas chuckled, shaking his head. I wouldn't dream of it. Their banter became routine, and before long, their friendship deepened into something more. He wasn't just her favorite customer anymore, he was someone she looked forward to seeing. Someone she could rely on. Everything was falling into place. Her restaurant was thriving. She had a trustworthy assistant. She had someone who cared about her. For the first time in years, Nia felt like she had a family again. But not everyone was happy for her. Across the market, the other food vendors watched in silence as Nia's stall continued to outshine their own. She was just a girl. She had no family, no legacy, yet she had built something that threatened everything they had worked for. And they were not going to stand by and let it continue. The market square had always been alive with chatter. But on this particular morning, something was different. The air felt heavier, the usual laughter replaced by hushed voices and stolen glances. Nia noticed it the moment she arrived at her stall. The tables and chairs were arranged. The cooking pots warmed, and the smell of freshly spiced stew filled the air, but there were no customers. She frowned. This was unusual. Normally, people would already be lining up, eager for their first meal of the day. Yet, now, the market seemed to avoid her. Vendors who usually greeted her with a nod barely made eye contact. The cloth seller beside her, who often borrowed spices, turned his back when she waved. At first, she thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe there was an unexpected town gathering or a religious ceremony keeping people away. But then, Jonas came running. He looked out of breath, his face dark with worry as he grabbed her by the wrist. Nia, he whispered urgently, something's wrong. She wiped her hands on her apron. I know, no one's coming today. Do you know why? Jonas glanced around before leaning in closer. There's a rumor going around, he said. People are saying that your food isn't clean. She raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I keep everything spotless. He exhaled sharply. They're saying you don't use regular water to cook. Nia's stomach clenched. What? Jonas hesitated before delivering the final blow. They say you go to the morgue to collect water from the dead and use it in your cooking. The words hit her like a slap. She stared at him, waiting for him to laugh, to tell her it was some kind of cruel joke. But his expression remained serious. That's ridiculous, she finally managed to say, her voice trembling. Who would believe something like that? Jonas shook his head. People are scared. Nia, no one is eating from your stall today because they think that's how you've been attracting so many customers. That you've been using dark magic. The absurdity of it made her laugh. But her laughter quickly died when she looked past Jonas and saw people watching her from a distance. Whispering. A sick feeling crawled up her spine. This is a lie, she whispered. I only use fresh water. Clean ingredients. She clenched her fists. I need to find out who started this. Jonas hesitated before speaking again. They're saying, one of your girls told them. Nia froze. She turned sharply towards her two assistants, Tara and Lena, who had been standing nearby, listening in stunned silence. Tara, she said, her voice sharp with betrayal. Lena, did one of you say this? Lena's face paled. Nia, I swear, I don't know anything about this. Tara's eyes widened. Why would I say something like that? You took me in when no one else did. I would never. Nia searched their faces, looking for any sign of guilt, any flicker of deceit. But all she saw was fear. Jonas folded his arms. If neither of you started this, then who did? The girls looked at each other but said nothing. The market around them was shifting, the murmurs growing louder, the stares turning colder. And then, in the distance, the market chief appeared, followed by a growing crowd of angry vendors. The look in his eyes told Nia that this was far from over. She wasn't just dealing with a rumor. She was dealing with a full-blown accusation. And if she didn't act fast, everything she had worked for would come crashing down. The crowd gathered quickly. The hum of voices rose into an angry murmur. And Nia could feel the weight of their stares pressing down on her like a heavy storm cloud. The market chief, a tall man with a stern face and a voice that carried authority, stepped forward, his arms crossed over his chest. Nia, he said, his tone cold and unwavering. We have received serious accusations about your business. Nia's heart pounded. Sir, this is all a lie, she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. The chief ignored her. It has come to our attention that you have been using unclean water from the dead, to cook your food and attract customers through dark means. A ripple of gasps swept through the crowd. Some shook their heads in disgust, while others whispered to one another, their faces twisted in uncertainty. Jonas stepped beside her, his jaw clenched. Who told you this? He demanded. The chief narrowed his eyes. Does it matter? What matters is that it came from a reliable source. Nia felt her hands tremble. I have never done such a thing in my life. I cook with clean water, fresh ingredients, like everyone else. Do you think I would poison the very people who keep my business alive? The chief exhaled sharply. That's not for me to decide. The market council has spoken. You are banned from selling food in this market. Nia's knees nearly buckled. No, she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. You can't do this to me. The crowd erupted into shouts. Get her out of here. We won't eat her cursed food. Witchcraft has no place in Korra. A sharp pain twisted in Nia's chest. These were people she had fed. People who had smiled at her, praised her cooking. Now they looked at her like she was a disease. Before she could say another word, someone threw a wooden stick at her stall. It hit the side of the table, knocking over a bowl of soup, the rich red sauce splattering onto the dusty ground. Jonas grabbed her hand. Nia, we have to go. Tears burned in her eyes as she looked around at the faces of those she had once called customers. Friends. Not one of them stood up for her. Tara and Lena stood frozen in place, eyes wide with fear. Nia turned to them, her voice thick with emotion. One of you did this, she said, her breath shaky. One of you betrayed me. Tara opened her mouth to speak, but Jonas pulled Nia away before she could hear the answer. The shouts followed him as they ran through the market, Nia stumbling over her own feet, her heart breaking with every step. That night, she locked herself in her small home, unable to stop the tears. She had worked so hard. She had built something from nothing. And now, it was all gone. She stayed inside for days, afraid to show her face in town. She had lost everything, her stall, her reputation, her future. But Jonas did not give up. One evening, as she sat staring at the empty fire pit where she used to cook, he returned with news that made her blood run cold. I found out who spread the rumor, he said. Nia looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. Who? Jonas hesitated, then said the name she never expected to hear. Tara. Nia's breath caught in her throat. Jonas continued, his face hard. She came to me, acting strange. At first, I thought she was just worried about you. But then, she confessed something else. He took a deep breath. She's in love with me. Nia. She told me to stay away from you because she believes you're cursed. Nia couldn't believe what she was hearing. She told me herself. Jonas continued. And when I pretended to agree with her, she admitted the rest. She was paid by the other food vendors to spread the lie about you. They promised her money and a place at one of their stalls if she ruined your business. Nia felt like she had been punched in the stomach. Tara, the girl she had given a chance. The girl she had trusted. She's at the market chief's office now, Jonas said. She confessed everything. And the food vendors who bribed her, they're about to face consequences. Nia wanted to feel relief. But all she felt was an unbearable ache in her chest. She had believed in Tara. She had given her a home, a purpose. And Tara had stabbed her in the back. Jonas took her hands in his eyes full of determination. You're not finished yet, Nia. This isn't how your story ends. But as she sat there, surrounded by the ruins of her dream, she wasn't sure if she believed him. The marketplace had always been loud. But on this day, it was silent. The usual calls of traders haggling, the scent of spices drifting through the air, and the clatter of plates being served, all of it had faded into an eerie hush. At the center of the square, Tara knelt on the dusty ground, her face streaked with tears. She wasn't alone. The other food vendors, the ones who had bribed her to ruin Nia's business, stood behind her, their faces pale with guilt and fear. The market chief stood before them, his sharp eyes cutting through the silence. The entire marketplace had gathered, watching, waiting. Tara, the chief's voice rang out, deep and firm. Is it true that you spread lies about Nia's business? Tara wiped her face, her hands trembling. Yes, she whispered. And did you do it alone? She shook her head and pointed at the group of food vendors behind her. No, they paid me to do it. The crowd gasped. Some of the vendors tried to step back, but the marketplace guards were already blocking any escape. The chief turned to them. Do you deny this? At first, there was silence, but then, one of the older vendors let out a defeated sigh. We were jealous, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Her food was too good. She was taking all our customers. We just wanted her gone. The crowd erupted into angry murmurs. She was just running an honest business. How could you ruin a girl's life because of jealousy? She fed all of us. And this is how you repay her. Nia stood in the back, her hands clenched. She had spent days in hiding, ashamed and heartbroken, believing she had lost everything. But now, standing here, seeing the truth unravel before her eyes, she felt something else. Anger, pain, but most of all, justice. The chief turned back to Tara. You betrayed the one person who took you in. Who gave you a chance? Tara's sobs grew louder, but Nia felt nothing for her now. The chief sighed, rubbing his forehead before delivering his verdict. Tara, you were banished from Cora. You will not be allowed to work in this market again, nor will you be welcome in this town. Tara gasped, her hands clasping together in a desperate plea. Please, I have nowhere to go. But no one spoke for her. She had made her choice. The chief then turned to the food vendors. As for you, your stalls will be shut down for 2 weeks. Each of you will pay a fine for the damage you caused. The vendors hung their heads in shame. Justice had been served. But for Nia, it didn't change one thing. She had lost everything. Even as Jonas stood beside her. Even as people whispered apologies. She knew she could never go back. The trust was gone. The market would never feel like home again. And so, that night, she made a decision. A week later, Jonas packed up Nia's few belongings into a wooden cart. You're sure about this? He asked. Nia nodded. I can't stay here, Jonas. Not after everything. The town of Cora had been her home, her battleground. But now, it was just a place full of bitter memories. Jonas smiled softly. Then I'll go with you. She looked at him, surprised. You would leave Cora? He shrugged. My home is wherever you are. Her heart swelled, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled. Together, they left Cora behind. A new town, a fresh start. Nia and Jonas opened a brand new restaurant. bigger than before, in a place where no one knew her past. The moment she fired up her stove, the moment the first pot of stew bubbled to perfection, she knew she had found home again. But this time, she made one change. She never hired another worker again. She and Jonas ran the business together, side by side, trusting no one but each other. And this time, no one could take it away from her.